Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So I'm breaking down the Monday Night Football Showdown slate between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys, and it should be a pretty exciting NFC East matchup. There's a lot of good players here for fantasy purposes. You have Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders, Devonta Smith. On the Cowboys side, you got Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Ezekiel Elliott, even Tony Pollard. So it should be a fun one to break down. Lots of exciting pieces and some good cheap pieces as well. But if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. You get access to a lot of extra content. And since we're close to the end of the month, if you do want to sign up, I can refund it for you as long as you do say sign up on October 1st. But you get access to the sheets, projections, cheat sheets, ownership projections, and a bunch of other stuff, including the Discord community. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by Prize Picks. I'm sure most of you know what it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you do sign you over on PrizePicks, you can get a free money bonus. That's an instant deposit match up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. So it's free money. Why not use it to your advantage and use some of your favorite DraftKings plays? Hit their over so you can win double the money on tonight's slate. But I think that'll be it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And starting us off with the quarterback position, this game features a 51.5 point over-under. So both Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts both look like they're going to be pretty much the two best plays on the entire slate. I'd have a hard time now playing either. I don't think it's a question of whether you want to play both these guys. It's just a question of, do you want to captain one of them? Because I typically lean toward using a pass catching option or a running back in the captain spot. Because if you look at the optimal lineup history and showdown sites, that's typically what it is. Quarterbacks don't usually pop up that much. Although I've also had this unique situation on this slate with Jalen Hurts due to his rushing ability, which does make me want to play him in the captain spot more often than I do most quarterbacks. Plus, this is a good matchup versus Dallas. They're 24th versus quarterbacks through 2 weeks and 21st DVA versus the pass, and that rushing floor is really hard to get away from. But in the flex spot, you're definitely playing these two guys if you're not putting one of them in the captain spot. Like I was using my projections, like just running my projections on the optimizer, it pretty much spits out 100% Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts. And I don't feel too bad about that. These guys should be the two highest owned players on the slate. If you want leverage, well, you almost have to go all the way in to get it. But Dak Prescott, will start with him $11,200. So he gets the worst of the two matchups versus Philly's defense, but you can still pass on them quite a bit. They have a 27.75 implied team total. 4-point favorites at home here. I know we didn't really throw the ball as much as we'd like to last week versus the Chargers. That was a bit of a letdown game. Didn't even have a passing touchdown. But I think he should bounce back in a big way here. I'm not really scared of Philly's pass defense too much. And he's got two of the best wide receivers in football to get the ball to, in Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. So I don't think I'll have any problem putting up a pretty big fantasy outing, and especially if you're playing cash games. I mean, just get both these quarterbacks in. I'm not sure I'd want to captain Dak Prescott. I will have some captain Dak Prescott lineups. I just won't have it as the majority of my lineups. And Jalen Hurts, $11,000. Another guy you're just pretty much locking in and moving on, although I would be more tempted to captain Jalen Hurts than I would Dak Prescott, just because that built-in rushing floor, averaging over 70 rushing yards per game through 2 weeks, which is pretty much a built-in 2 passing touchdown floor, even before he does anything through the air. So anything he does through the air, it's pretty much the icing on top. But Jalen Hurts gets a great matchup here versus Dallas, 24th versus quarterbacks through 2 weeks, 21st DVA versus the pass. He can absolutely do a lot of damage on the ground, which they don't have a great rushing defense either, and they are 4-point dogs here, so hopefully they're playing from behind. He has to play catch-up the entire game, which would be great for me. I don't think it's going to be a blowout or anything. It should be pretty back and forth for the most part, but like the matchup, I love Jalen Hurts as a fantasy quarterback, and $11,000. He's a little bit cheaper than Dak, and he's right up there in projection with him. So it's just a matter of, do you want to captain him or not? Because I'm definitely playing him in the flex spot. I'm definitely having exposure everywhere in both these quarterbacks. So then moving on to our lineup, like I said, I'm probably going to lean towards a pass catching option in the captain spot. If you want to roster one of these guys in the captain, for me it would be Jalen Hurts. He's also a little bit cheaper than Dak Prescott. If you happen to go that route and put Dak in the flex spot, you're only left with around $5,500 per player, which it's certainly possible, although you're going to miss out on a couple of big spend-up options. Not saying a guy like CeeDee Lamb in the captain spot is all that cheaper, but it does offer you a couple more $1,000 to work with. So as of right now, we're just going to plug in Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott in the flex spot. If we could fit one of these guys in the captain spot at the end, that'd be great. And I would definitely want exposure to some of these guys in the captain spot. But as of right now, for this build, more of a cash game build, we're just going to put both in the flex spot so we can ensure we're going to get some more studs in our lineup. Then moving on to the running back position, we'll start with the Dallas Cowboys group first, and it's pretty much just Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard here. Don't have to worry about anybody else. Ezekiel Elliott obviously going to get the first crack at touches, but Tony Pollard is certainly going to be involved in this game. He had 13 carries last week compared to Ezekiel Elliott at 17, I believe. And he's also involved in the pass game. He's had more targets and catches than Zeke Elliott through 2 weeks. I'm going to be honest, every single time I watch the Cowboys, Tony Pollard looks like a much better running back than Zeke Elliott. Not saying Zeke sucks or anything, but Pollard always seems a lot more electric than Zeke Elliott does every single time he's on the field. He's a little bit cheaper, although the volume is definitely safer with Zeke Elliott here. And Pollard Maybe a little bit expensive for me. I know he's going to be involved in this game. It's just Zeke Elliott's definitely going to be a safer bet with volume. And if we look at their touch distribution through 2 weeks, Zeke Elliott's at 13.5 rushing attempts on 2 targets. Tony Pollard's at 8 rushing attempts and 3.5 targets. Also, Pollard's at 7.7 yards per carry, and Zeke's only at 3.9. Obviously, it's a smaller sample size for Pollard, but he really looks like the better of the running back. He really looks like the better running back when he's on the field. Although I'm going to be honest, if you are playing Zeke, you're probably going to need a touchdown because if he does not score, more than likely not going to be happy with the output. And I'd much rather get a pass catching option at somewhat of a similar price point. And the same can be said for the Eagles running back group here. They both kind of have similar splits to what the Cowboys have, as Miles Sanders played around 70% of the snaps last week, and Kenneth Gainwell around 30. Boston Scott is pretty much non-existent in this offense. So again, it's just a two-man show here. I'm not in love with either of these two running backs. Miles Sanders, we should expect to get the most volume here, averaging 14 rushing attempts per game compared to Kenneth Gainwell at 7.5. Also getting 3 targets per game compared to Gainwell at 2.5, although both guys do have the ability to get a rushing touchdown around the goal line. Kenneth Gainwell is cheaper, so if you want to go that route, I don't mind it, but I don't think the running backs in either team are must-plays here. Maybe more so tournament targets, because the passing game on both sides just grades out a little bit better for me, and I want this game to be pretty back and forth. I'm playing both quarterbacks, so it just makes more sense when I roster the pass-catching options over the running backs on the slate. So we're going to bypass putting any of those running backs in the lineup as of right now, just because I'm not sure exactly which route I want to go. So move on to the wide receivers, and this is definitely the more fun group to talk about. So we'll start with the Dallas Cowboys here, and we have CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Cedric Wilson, because no Michael Gallup, and then Noah Brown down there at $200. If you're looking at the snap distribution last week, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper very close to 100, Cedric Wilson very close to 60. Then Noah Brown got in close to 20% of the snaps, although he did not really have any stats to show for it. Cedric Wilson definitely disappointed last week. I believe he only had 1 or 2 catches. But CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, they're going to run the show here. If I had to pick between the two, I know he's a little bit more expensive, but it's CeeDee Lamb for me. I think he's the more talented receiver of the two, although Amari Cooper is definitely a very good wide receiver. I can't really say anything bad about him, and he was fantastic in week 1, kind of a no-show in week 2. CeeDee Lamb kind of carried wide receiver group there, but both guys are excellent options. But if I'm using Dak Prescott, I feel like you pretty much have to have one of these two options, and I think it makes sense to want to put one of those two in the captain spot, because just correlation-wise, I think it makes sense. Looking through 2 weeks, 12 targets per game for CeeDee Lamb, 11 targets for Amari Cooper, 28% target share for Lamb, 25% target share for Cooper. Both guys are just absolutely fantastic options. I mean, CeeDee Lamb's had a 43% market share of the team's air yards through 2 weeks, and while the Philadelphia Eagles are 60th versus the pass and first versus fantasy wide receivers so far, I don't think that's going to stay the same throughout the entire season. I think a matchup versus Lamb and Cooper and the Dak Prescott-led Cowboys are definitely going to change that. And as far as the other two guys, Cedric Wilson and Noah Brown, I think Cedric Wilson is fine at that price point at $4,400. He's going to be on the field a lot. They run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. And assuming the Cowboys throw the ball more than they did last week, Cedric Wilson should get a handful of targets. And if he can just catch a few of those, he'll be fine at $4,400. Although I wish he was a little bit cheaper, but I still think he's a fine value play. And if you're looking for an absolute punt option, Noah Brown at $200. He played on nearly 20% of the snaps last week. Did not get a target, had no stats to show for it. But if he just catches a ball or 2, or maybe even 3, if he happens to get into the end zone, he'll be by far the best value play on the entire slate at $200. And if you do roster Noah Brown in the flex spot, you can pretty much build whatever lineup you want. So he's there if you need a punt option just to make things work up top. It might not be the safest route to go, but it definitely opens up a lot on this slate. Then moving on to the Philly group here, it includes Smith, Rager, Watkins, and Greg Ward. Whiteside, he was on the field a little bit just in this offense. Smith led the team at 85% of the snaps. Jalen Rager on 75, Watkins around half of the snaps at 50. Then Greg Ward got in close to 35. So it's pretty much the ones you want to care about here. Smith, obviously the one you want. I would love to be able to fit him in this lineup. I also like the over on his prop. I think his receiving yard prop on Price Picks is like 55 yards or 56 yards. I took the over on that, so hopefully I don't get screwed there, but I think that's a pretty comfortable over in my opinion versus this Dallas pass defense. But so far this season, he's got a 27% target share. Jalen Rager at a 20% target share. Kes Watkins at only a 9% target share, although he just have a nice 8 out of 10.4. And then Greg Ward, pretty much nothing. Same goes for Whiteside at $100. So really the only 3 you're going to care about are Smith, Rager, and Watkins, and I actually think all 3 are viable. It just depends on what you can fit in your lineup. The preferred option would be Smith. I mean, he's the most exciting one. He's the first-round pick. He had a very good game in week 1. Didn't really do too much in week 2, but I would definitely like to try to be able to fit Smith in. But this is a very good matchup versus Dallas. Last season, they were one of the worst teams in the league versus fantasy wide receivers, and through 2 weeks, they're the 4th worst team, allowing nearly 54 DraftKings points per game in their 21st DVA versus the pass. These guys draw excellent matchups. Plus, I'm expecting the Eagles to be trailing in this game, so that does bode well for the passing attack as well, and it correlates fine with Jalen Hurts. So moving on over to our lineup, we're not going to be able to fit in every single wide receiver I would like to. Although I said I want to get one of Dak Prescott's wide receiver in the captain spot, just because I think it correlates just fine. If you want to use Jalen Hurts wide receivers like Smith or whoever it may be, that is fine too. But as of right now, I want to try to get one of the studs of either Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb. Now it's going to put a big dent in our salary remaining because we have $7,000 right now. We're going to put in a guy that's $14-some thousand in CeeDee Lamb, who I just think is the better play over Amari Cooper. And if we do that, we have around $4,300 left per player, which again doesn't give us much to work with. Well, we can use kickers, we can use a cheap wide receiving option or something like that. So I think we can make it work. And the ceiling for CeeDee Lamb, I think, is extremely high in this game. And we could fill in some more spots here, but since we still have tight ends and defenses and kickers to talk about, I'll refrain from doing that until the very end. Now moving on to the tight end position, it's kind of gross for both teams because both these teams have pretty much two tight ends that play a good chunk of the game. Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz for Philly, both played over 60% of the snaps last week. Although I will say the price tag on Ertz does make him a little bit appealing because if we look at his numbers compared to Dallas Goedert, I know he's not like a big threat these days and he's pretty washed up, but Goddard's seeing 3.5 targets per game. Zach Ertz is at 2, so it's really not that far off. I mean, it's a 7.2% target share compared to a 12.7. Obviously, I prefer Dallas Goedert, but is he really worth being over $4,000 more expensive than Zach Ertz? I'm not really so sure. Then as for the Cowboys, you have Dalton Schultz and Blake Jarwin. Dalton Schultz played around 70% of the snaps last. Blake Jarwin played close to half, although they have the exact same target share through 2 weeks, 9.52%. So really, all these options here are just kind of gross. They're fine cheap options, and if they happen to find the end zone, they'll be a pretty good value play. And I will say Blake Jarwin and Zach Ertz just from a point per dollar perspective, but I'm not really excited about any of the tight ends on this slate, although I don't think they're complete fades. They just really aren't high ceiling options unless they get into the end zone. Even then, really still not that great. They're not going to do a lot of damage in the yards department. We're talking 33, 31, 28, and 20 for their average yards per game through 2 weeks. As far as defenses go, if you had to pick one, I would say the Cowboys, but I don't want to really play either. Both these defenses I wouldn't say are all that great. I think the Eagles have a better defense than the Cowboys, but I'm going to have so much Cowboys exposure. I don't really want to play the Eagles. I'm going to have a lot of Eagles exposure, so I don't really want to play the Cowboys defense. If a defense happens to be optimal or one of them catches a touchdown, I'll be more than happy to take the L. I just don't see it happening on this slate. And at 51.5 point over-under. Then moving on to the kickers here, they are what they are. If they hit their field goals, they become decent value plays. They're fine cash game options because they're pretty much guaranteed points unless the team happens to get blown out somehow or they just go for it every single time. The problem is they lack upside in tournaments because they can't run the ball, catch the ball, or throw the ball, and they can't score touchdowns, so their upside is quite limited. But in cash games, just to make it work as a last piece fit, I don't hate it because kickers can be optimal. We saw that with Graham Gano a couple weeks ago, but I would not be rostering them in the captain spot. If I had to pick between the two, I think Greg DeLeg's the better option because they have the higher implied team total, which means more scoring opportunities, but both options are fine. Projection-wise, they're both very similar. So moving back to our lineup to try to finish this off, I would love to be able to get Devonta Smith in with Jalen Hurts. I know it's going to put a real dent in our salary because we only have $4,300 left remaining, and he's around $7,000. So we plug him in. That gives us $2,900 left, which I don't feel great about. So we might actually have to go the tight end route because I know they're kind of cheap, and they do offer you a little bit of a floor there because they're going to be involved. It's just the ceilings are kind of low. But if they allow us to fit in guys like CeeDee Lamb in the captain spot with both quarterbacks and the wide receiver one for both QBs here, I think it might be worth it because they are going to see targets in this game, and maybe, just maybe, they happen to fall into the end zone. So if we go a little bit dumpster diving here, we have options like Blake Jarwin. We have Zach Ertz here, both $3,000, $2,000, which this actually might be the way we have to go. I'm not sure if we can fit in Dalton Schultz. If we do that, that's going to leave us $1,100 for our last spot, which I don't really like anybody down there, maybe besides the Noah Brown punt. So I feel like that's probably not the best way to go, especially if we're kind of gearing towards a cash game lineup. So we'll plug in Blake Jarwin. He didn't play as much snaps as Dalton Schultz last week, but he's still going to see similar target share, which is kind of all I care about because, I mean, I can't get points if he's just going to be out there doing nothing. So at least just $2,100 left. We could throw in Zach Ertz. We could throw in Greg Ward. Greg Ward played around 35% of the snaps last week, although he doesn't really have any targets to show for it this year. Zach Ertz is $2,200. I know it's not pretty, but he has had 2 targets in each game thus far. And I know he's extremely washed and old. He's not going to do too much in the yards department, but if he happens to fall into the end zone at $2,200, that is not the worst play in the world. So I kind of just got done bashing the tight ends, but make some things work up top. I don't think this is a terrible lineup. So you got CeeDee Lamb paired up with Dak Prescott. You have Jalen Hurts paired up with Devonta Smith. Then you have the 2 tight ends, Blake Jarwin and Zach Ertz, which is fun because there's still pass-catching options with our quarterback. Now, obviously, there's many other ways you can go. You could roster a quarterback in the captain spot. You could use Amari Cooper over CeeDee Lamb, which allow you a little bit more salary to maybe upgrade from guys like Blake Jarwin or Zach Ertz. But this is just an example. Don't blindly follow this. It's just something I made on the fly. But looking at this slate, it does look pretty flexible in what you can do at the captain spot or just what you want to do at the flex spot. So I hope this video was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by Prize Picks, just you versus the projections. And as of right now, for your new signing over there, you can get a free money bonus. That's an instant deposit match up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. I think that'll be pretty much it. I will stop rambling, and I'll see you guys in the first look video on Tuesday morning.